Why is it so hard to take Star Trek, a sci-fi adventure show, and turn it into a good movie that everyone can enjoy? I'm writer-producer Trader Bubba out here in beautiful California, and this is Bubba Breaks Sci-Fi.
You're gonna see some serious shit.
So say we all.
Engage.
I'm not going to sit here and go through every movie and its box office success and failures, but the proof is in the pudding. Obviously, it's a well-known trope that the even Star Trek movies are the best, all the way from the original cast through the TNG movies. Even that doesn't completely hold up, at least for a lot of fans. Let's start with Star Trek: The Motion Picture, and this is where this movie, I think, answers the question why it's so hard to turn Star Trek into a movie, at least for some people. Star Trek is so many different things to so many different people. It's such a huge universe to play in. There's so many different types of stories you can tell in a Star Trek universe that when it comes time to make a movie where you're only telling one story at an incredibly high cost, what's that story going to be? Because obviously from a business standpoint, that story has to attract everybody. And with Star Trek: The Motion Picture, they completely ran in a weird direction. The movie's long, it's beautiful, insane shots that take 10 minutes. It's an interesting movie, and I enjoy Star Trek: The Motion Picture. You just kind of have to be in the mood for it. So when Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan came around, they turned Star Trek into a submarine naval battle movie, and it is probably the most popular of all Star Trek movies. It's the golden ticket. It's the thing that set the bar at a level saying we need to reach or surpass this level of storytelling for future Star Trek movies. And they couldn't do it. They couldn't do it. Star Trek 3, The Return of Spock, again, I love that movie. I love all Star Trek movies, I guess, but that's a lot of people were kind of like, meh. And then Star Trek 4 worked, but because it's almost not a Star Trek movie. It's almost a fish out of water, Back to the Future kind of comedy where these two guys from the future have to come back to the past or modern day, which 1980s, and save a whale to save the future. I mean, the premise alone is hilarious. And then the execution was a perfect blend of science fiction and comedy. It really relied on that comedy to make that movie work. And that is very much a fan favorite. I love that movie. It's personally not one of my favorite Star Trek. It's not, it's a great movie. It's almost not a Star Trek movie. But again, the even numbers. And then after that, we had Star Trek V, William Shatner's directorial debut, which, by the way, I feel like that movie gets more hate than it deserves. First of all, the budget was slashed on that thing. They had script problems in the beginning, but the finished product isn't that bad. I actually really like that movie. It's fun. It's adventurous. It's William Shatner asking about God, which if you ever watch Shatner interviews, that man can really go into philosophy and talk about these giant, questions. And that's what this movie is. They're looking for God. And it's funny because this is what Gene Roddenberry wanted to do. And obviously he sort of did with Star Trek: The Motion Picture. He wanted to make a movie where the crew looks for God in space. And the studio was like, no. And then when it came time for William Shatner to direct, he's like, I have a great idea. They should look for God. I see you. Hit that subscribe button and I'll read to you the naughty parts of Imzadi. And then you get to Star Trek VI, which is another fan favorite. Again, even number. It's the last outing for the original cast. And in this movie, this is what Star Trek does best. They ask what's going on in our real world and how can we talk about it using the universe of Star Trek. So that way we're not overly preaching. We're not necessarily saying, here's our opinion on what's going on. It's really asking a question about who we are and where we're at, especially as a world and as a country here in the United States. And this is what Star Trek does best at its peak, especially as a TV show. And it's a fantastic film. The effects are amazing. It's wonderful to see the cast take one last adventure on this just beautiful looking set You know, the Enterprise refit never looked better than it did in their final outing in Star Trek 6, in my opinion. Going into Star Trek Generations, this movie did pretty well. I did a whole review video on this channel of, you know, my thoughts on Star Trek Generations. Take a look when you get a chance. They're taking a really big swing, but the movie did okay. It did well in the box office, so they got to keep going, and then they got to make Star Trek First Contact. Now, First Contact was a massive success, and that movie really didn't have that big of a budget. No Star Trek movies really ever had the budget that you saw in with like the Kelvin Timeline movies, right? The J.J. Abrams movies. Before that, the studio was always very like, okay, we're going to do a Star Trek movie. Let's keep the budget tight. Let's not go too crazy here. Because as big as the audience is for Star Trek, as much as the fan base is rabid for it, you know, with the Star Trek conventions and just, hey, here we are 60 plus years later, and there's still conventions. My Star Trek actor friend that I know was just in Germany at a convention. As big as the fan base is, the movies have never really performed blockbuster, you know, like they've never really been a consistent money machine for the studio. It's always been a little hit or miss for whatever reasons, lots of reasons. So when First Contact came out, that movie did gangbusters. But why? Well, it's got the biggest baddie from the TNG series, the Borg, which have been overused at this point, in my opinion. But at this point, it was like, oh my God, they're making a Borg movie. Like, it's going to be darker. It's going to have a lot of action. They really tried to turn Picard into like Star Trek Rambo in that movie, which is kind of funny. There's some great stuff in there again with Data. Everyone gets to have their moment. It still has time travel stuff because you can't make a Star Trek movie without traveling through time, apparently. And it also goes deeper into the Star Trek lore. We see Zefram Cochrane and the birth of warp drive here on Earth and all that good stuff. The movie Star Trek Insurrection really didn't push anything forward with the characters. You know, Wrecker and Troy kind of get back together in that movie, which, you know, is great. But there's no real character push for Data, which is a huge fan favorite, you know, Worf, or even Picard, really. You know, once again, Picard falls in love with an alien woman on this planet. It really comes off as like an episode where they're in the writer's room. They're like, we need 20 some episodes. We're up to like 19. We need like 4 more episodes for the season. Someone's like, I have this idea about this. And they're like, that is just good enough. Go write it. You know, not a bad idea, not a great idea. It's just good enough. Let's write that script and we'll put it in for the season. And then finally, we got Star Trek Nemesis, the final movie in the TNG franchise. And, you know, I really liked it when I saw it in the theater. But when it became clear that this was going to be the last one for sure, the crew was not given their proper send-off. And then finally, like I said, Star Trek is so many things to so many different people. And the other biggest proof is, quite frankly, the first J.J. Abrams Star Trek movie, the first Kelvin movie. Because if you look at that movie, I've heard some people call it the dumbed down version of Star Trek, because it really is. It's a super flashy action film. It's not at all a science fiction romanticism of space travel and exploration film. It's really all about these hot rodding characters of, you know, the future getting together to take command of the Starship Enterprise and shoot first and ask questions later. Hey, this video is brought to you by TraderBubba.com. At TraderBubba.com, I got all sorts of fun new sci-fi shirts and mugs. Tea. Okay. Hot. Release the Riker Files. This is actually one of my favorites. Huge seller. And I survived Wolf 359. All proceeds do go to charity. The charity does change once in a while, so come back and take a look at that. TraderBubba.com. Link in the description down below. Star Trek is so many things to so many different people. Look at the division in the fan base in the last 10 years because of politics, which I'm not going to get into. We're not going to talk about that here. But look at the division, because Star Trek is so many things to so many different people. That is why it's so hard to turn Star Trek into a great movie. We almost had a continuation of the Kelvin franchise. We almost had an additional Star Trek movie written and directed by Quentin Tarantino, an R-rated Star Trek movie. How crazy would that have been? That would have divided the fan base, I think, worse than the new Star Trek shows, you know, because you want to be able to take your kids to it and have a good time. And here, Quentin Tarantino is probably just dropping N-words left and right and doing who knows what with Sam Jackson as a bad guy swearing up a storm in a Star Trek movie. there's nothing you can't do with this franchise if you have some balls and if you're willing to take a chance, I guess. But this is why it's so hard to turn Star Trek into a good movie that everyone can get behind. It's not impossible. They've done it more than once. Guys, I'm writer, producer, Trader Bubba. Here's crossing fingers that we get a new Star Trek movie soon. I would just like to see a whole new cast of characters on a whole new ship. Let's do something new, fresh, and original. Stop going after the nostalgia berries. Do something new. Show me something new. Tell a new story. Tell the next generation of Star Trek stories, either in movie or TV form. That's my take. Thank you so much for checking out this channel. Don't forget to like, subscribe. It really helps this brand new baby channel grow. Don't go away just yet. I got a lot of other videos, and they're entertaining. You're going to want to watch them.